I'm Nima Rajan. The federal government is expanding its definition of a pandemic lockdown. This in order to make more businesses and workers eligible for financial assistance. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland says wage and rent support programs will be able to support workers and businesses that see capacity restricted by 50% or more. The new rules will allow laid-off employees to access the Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit, which provides $300 a week to anyone who can't work because of a COVID-19 lockdown. It will also let business owners access targeted aid if they are forced to close their doors. Well, it looks like more restrictions are coming this week in several provinces. This in their latest attempt to attack the fifth wave spread of COVID-19 and its highly transmissible Omicron variant. Ontario, Quebec, BC, Alberta, and Manitoba have announced capacity limits for some businesses, entertainment venues, and social gatherings. Alberta has cut in half the seating for the World Junior Hockey Tournament. And in Atlantic Canada, Prince Edward Island joined Newfoundland and Labrador in announcing isolation requirements for all visitors. Ontario, Alberta, and BC are also speeding up their booster doses for all adults. NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman says it isn't feasible to send players to the Beijing Olympics. This is because of the profound disruption to the league's schedule caused by COVID-19. The NHL is battling an explosion of cases that has forced it to postpone dozens of games. More than 15% of its players are in the league's COVID-19 protocol. NHL Players Association Executive Director Don Fear says that while players are disappointed, completing the season takes precedence over the Olympics. The National Ballet of Canada has canceled remaining performances of the Nutcracker because of COVID-19. Executive Director Barry Houston says there have been breakthrough cases of COVID-19 within company ranks. He says ticket holders have been contacted and have been offered several options, including a full refund. The ballet company has said all of the performers and crew workers on the Nutcracker were fully vaccinated. The National Ballet of Canada first performed the Nutcracker in 1995. Newfoundland and Labrador's Chief Medical Officer of Health says the entire province is moving to a heightened alert level as COVID-19 infections surge. Bars, cinemas, and theaters will have to close as of midnight tonight, and the government is imposing limits on gatherings and household bubbles of up to 20 close contacts. Dr. Janice Fitzgerald says there are now outbreaks in 3 of the province's 4 health regions. Ontario's Niagara Region Public Health is shifting resources away from contact tracing to delivering COVID-19 booster doses. This in an attempt to blunt the wave of Omicron infections. Other public health units in Ontario are adopting the same strategy as cases surge. Yesterday, Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Kieran Moore, said the province was preparing to change its strategy on COVID-19 testing and case management in light of Omicron. Small business owners say Canadians continue to support independent and local businesses this year, but meeting the customers' needs has become more tricky. The owners say the message from last year's marketing campaigns around how small businesses are struggling during the pandemic has stuck and is translating to sales once more. However, capitalizing on the interest has been difficult because of inflation, shipping delays, COVID-19 outbreaks, and flooding in BC. Well, meanwhile, the BC government has urged residents to prepare for extremely cold temperatures, power outages, and slick streets. This comes as a series of winter storm and freezing rain warnings covered most of the province overnight. Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth says it's important to carefully watch the weather and forecast and look out for those who are most vulnerable. Transportation Minister Rob Fleming has discouraged travel that isn't necessary. Warnings from Environment Canada cover most of the province. The COVID-19 pandemic has intensified homelessness in Alberta's capital. A city report last month found about 2,800 Edmonton residents are experiencing homelessness, which is double the number from 2019. An agency supporting people who are living rough says coronavirus has cut space at shelters, leaving hundreds unable to find refuge. Boyle Street Community Services says an influx of people are experiencing homelessness for the first time after losing jobs during the pandemic. The World Junior Hockey Tournament is going ahead in Alberta this week, despite rising COVID-19 cases in the host province and around the world. Premier Jason Kenney says his government will try to blunt the spread of the virus with a new set of province-wide restrictions on Friday. Large venues seating over 1,000 people, including sports arenas, will be capped at half capacity, and no food or drink may be consumed in the stands. The Canadian squad opens the tournament against the Czechs at Edmonton's Rogers Place on Sunday. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Up next, we take a look at the markets. Forum Daily's weekly market update with Catherine Murray, host of The Buck Stops Here Up Now. All yours, Catherine.
Thank you, Nima. Hello, everyone, and welcome to your weekly market update. I am Catherine Murray. Well, we are seeing markets right now up across the board to the tune of 0.5 to 1% in Canada as well as in the United States. But we really have to step back to the beginning of this week where we saw some major swings across the board. It was very much a risk-off day on Monday. Markets were really selling off, stemming from concerns on Omicron and the impact that would have on the global economic recovery. So it was pretty much of a sell on the news day. Markets on average were down by about 1.5%, arguably not too severe versus the headlines, the concerns surrounding Omicron. We did see growth stocks suffer at the beginning of the week. Oil declined by about 5% over the prior two sessions, so big drop down in the price of crude oil. And basically just a risk-off tone. Also, of course, saw the cryptocurrencies hit as well. Those concerns, however, were reversed with a turnaround Tuesday. Yesterday, we saw some major moves higher as investors really focus on the view that Omicron appears to be less severe, and in particularly with those who have 3 doses. So there's a little bit more of a calmness surrounding the impact that Omicron can actually have. It is somewhat quiet today on the headline front, other than, again, the focus on the variant, the virus, Omicron. But of course, the other big news item this week, which we can't forget about because it has been a bit of a potential fiscal policy tailwind for the markets, was, of course, President Biden's Build Back Better plan, which was essentially killed by Democratic Senator Manchin out of West Virginia at the beginning of the week. $1.9 trillion, it appears he can't get on side with the size of the deal. And also, of course, because we've got inflation, so just fueling more money into the system. He also apparently believes that we should be focused more on fighting COVID. And also, this is interesting, there's an aspect of the bill that would allow for more incentives on the energy efficient front or the transition. And the point there is that, yes, we want to support all of that, and we are, but we also have to be careful that we're not moving too far, too fast ahead of the technology, and therefore being more reliant on foreign energy sources. So that was also a point that was brought up as well. And just go back to what we saw in California as well as Texas on the electric grid front earlier this year and all the difficulties that they had getting energy sources. So that aside, that's been another big news item this week. In terms of other items, of course, that we're watching on when we think about COVID, we have, of course, heard a number of cancellations. The NHL is pulling out of Beijing. But I'm also seeing and hearing reports that the holiday travel demand is still very strong. So again, that bodes well for the overall economic recovery, which of course at the beginning of the week was called into question. We are, of course, hearing though that the EU is tightening COVID restrictions. Israel is actually now giving 4th doses to those 60 and older and those who are vulnerable. We're hearing that Quebec has 5,000 cases. 80% is Omicron. Alberta and BC are tightening. Ontario restricting some hospital visits. So all of that are things that we have to think about when we talk about the economy. But many are also saying no lockdowns, particularly out of the United States as well as the UK. Just kind of wrapping up some of the market action. WTI has rebounded from those pullbacks at the beginning of the week and is up by about 1.5% today. U.S. 10-year yield is holding around that 1.47 level, so not a lot of movement there. In terms of corporate stories and stock stories, BlackBerry reported their most recent results. They did have a beat on the top line, but their guidance did disappoint investors. So that stock's trading lower by about 4%. TD actually lowered their price target on the stock to $8.50 from $9. In terms of other stocks to watch, Williams Sonoma, that was actually upgraded at Loop Capital to buy Caterpillar in the industrial space. If you're looking for a stop there, that was upgraded over Bernstein. That's the kind of firm that looks for value plays. Darden Restaurants was also upgraded. Stepping back and kind of rounding out the year when we think about where we've been and where we are now and the concerns surrounding Omicron, I read an interesting note from a strategist today saying we've actually been talking about COVID for 2 years this January. So January 2020, if you can believe it. His view seems to be it will almost be rearview mirror. We've got the vaccines and we have pills coming and warmer weather. And the view is that we might get back to actually really looking at the fundamentals, fundamental investing, taking a look at stock-specific stories. So I'll leave you on that positive note. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and we'll see you soon. Nima, back to you.
Thanks for the positive look forward, Catherine. For more analysis and news on the markets, be sure to tune into Catherine Murray on The Buck Stops Here. All right, coming up, we take a look at shipbuilding in Canada. And after that, of course, a look at more news stories from around the world on Forum Daily News. Stay tuned. COVID-19 related issues could cause added delays in the delivery of already overdue warships and other new equipment for the Canadian Armed Forces. The Halifax and Vancouver shipyards building new fleets for the Navy and Coast Guard have been hit hard by lockdowns and supply chain disruptions. These factors are pushing back the delivery dates of new ships to replace the Royal Canadian Navy's aging fleet. They are also pushing up the costs for more than 20 ships under construction or still to be built. However, a new report from the Macdonald-Laurier Institute says the Canadian Surface Combatant Program must go ahead. Well, joining us now is Mr. Richard Shimuka, Senior Fellow at MLI and the author of No Other Option, Politics, Policy and Industrial Consideration in the Canadian Surface Combatant Program. Sir, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thanks for having me.
So can you give us a brief overview of this report and its main findings, sir?
Absolutely. So I basically take an oral history, talking to a lot of the people who are involved throughout the entire program for its basically 20 plus year gestation. And I come up with a number of kind of considerations that I think are critical for understanding where the program are today. 3 in particular, I think are they're basically the foundational assessments, foundational parts of the program that people have to understand to really get a sense of where we are today. And those are that Canada wanted to build these ships within Canada. It needed to basically restart an entire naval construction industry dedicated to building government-produced, not just warships, but also Coast Guard vessels and supply ships. The second one was that Canada wanted a capability that was basically able to operate successfully with its allies, such as primarily the United States, but also with the United Kingdom and other countries. And the third was that Canada basically stopped building warships for a better part of almost 20 years, starting at the end of the 1990s up until about 2015, 2016, when the Arctic Offshore Patrol Vessel program basically started at that time. So those are the 3 critical ones. And when you understand those 3 parts, you kind of start getting a sense of all the, not just the issues, but why the program has unfolded the way it has over the past, 10, 15 years.
And we know the CSC program is getting some criticism as another failed procurement process, but it's interesting that your report is saying that these missteps are reasonable. So tell us a little bit more about this.
I think it's really one of the things that it's always you're trying to think of the program and you're saying, well, we see a cost increase or we see that these are delays, but basically building any large procurement, but specifically naval procurements, these take many, many years to kind of put together, to assemble the warships, assemble the systems, design, and sort of produce the infrastructure in order to produce them. And because we had stopped producing warships for almost 20 years, that had to be completely reassembled. Throughout the late 1990s and 2000s, the project management capability within Department of National Defense had largely atrophied. It had been cut down almost by half, and the ability for DN to actually manage this large program just wasn't there. So in order to rebuild, in order to sort of create the knowledge and the capacity to build these vessels was going to take a lot of time. And obviously the cost and the capability sort of dynamics that occurred within the department leads to increased costs. But the other side of it is that if we were to just an option that a lot of people suggest, which is just buy them from foreign yards, means that you basically are going to just be putting money out the door, and there's going to be very little industrial benefits back to Canada. And that's going to be real difficult to sell for any Canadian government to go to the people and say, well, we're going to spend $30 billion and there's going to be absolutely no return value to Canada. So that's kind of the dynamic that the Canadian government, especially in the late 2000s and early 2010s, kind of grappled with. Is that yes, it's going to cost more, and we're not exactly sure how much it's going to cost, but that the value here is worth it, and we need to kind of push forward with this kind of program.
All right, sir, just about 30 seconds left here, but would you be able to speak on the strategic importance of procuring these new Navy ships for the Canadian Navy?
Absolutely. I think that if you look in the international sphere today, you look at tensions between Russia and the Ukraine, where the Black Sea plays an important part. You see it definitely within China and its neighbors, such as Japan and Taiwan and India. Basically, the control of the naval seaways is really critical, and Canada needs to have a credible ability to play its part in these areas in order to ensure, our peace and prosperity at home.
Russia's top diplomat says that Russian and U.S. negotiators will sit down for talks early next year. This to discuss Moscow's demand for Western guarantees precluding NATO's expansion to the Ukraine. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Wednesday that Russia in January will also start separate talks with NATO to discuss the issue. He added that separate negotiations under the aegis of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe will also be held. World Health Organization Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says no country can boost its way out of the pandemic. Dr. Tedros is warning that blanket booster programs in rich countries risk prolonging the global battle against COVID-19. He says the priority must be to help all countries and meet minimum vaccination targets, adding that it's difficult to understand that 75% of healthcare workers in Africa remain unvaccinated. Dr. Tedros is once again urging drug companies and other countries to prioritize the COVAX program and get doses to needier nations. Medical experts say South Africa's dramatic Omicron-driven surge in COVID-19 cases may have passed its peak. Daily virus case counts are notoriously unreliable, and they are offering a hint that Omicron infections may recede quickly after a ferocious spike. After hitting a high of nearly 27,000 new cases on Thursday, the numbers dropped to just over 15,400 yesterday. Dutch prosecutors are demanding life sentences for 4 suspects being tried in absentia for the 2014 downing of Malaysia Airlines flight MH17 over eastern Ukraine. All 298 passengers and crew were killed. Life sentences are rare in the Netherlands, but the prosecutor says they are appropriate in this case because of the extreme nature of the crime. The 3 Russians and 1 Ukrainian were separatist rebels. They are accused of forming a team that aimed to bring down Ukrainian planes using a missile system trucked in from a Russian military base. A Thai army officer says fighting between Myanmar government forces and ethnic guerrillas has sent about 4,200 villagers fleeing across the border into Thailand over the past week. That number includes over 2,500 who fled into Thailand on Friday from territory held by the ethnic Karen minority. A similar wave took place in April. The Karen are one of several ethnic minorities that have been battling for decades for greater autonomy from Myanmar's central government. A government panel has submitted a report to Japan's prime minister, proposing ways to retain the country's male-only imperial succession system. In the face of a sharply shrinking number of men in the royal family, the panel recommends steps such as adopting single men from some of the 11 now defunct royal households as potential heirs, and letting female royals retain their status after marrying commoners. Emperor Naruhito's only child is a woman, and he only has two possible successors, his younger brother and his teenage nephew. The European Union and the United Kingdom have struck a fishing deal on their shared stocks. But environmentalists say fish will continue to be overexploited under the new post-Brexit rules. Wednesday's decision reverts back to last year's trade deal between France and the UK. It sets catch quotas and rights for about 100 shared fish stocks in each other's waters. The agreement Wednesday is separate from the spat between France and Britain over fishing licenses. The U.S. has opened a formal investigation into the passenger play feature on Tesla vehicles that lets drivers play video games on a central touchscreen while they are driving. The U.S. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration investigation covers about 580,000 electric vehicles, starting with the 2017 model year. Tesla owner Vince Patton filed the complaint last month because he's worried the dangerous distraction could lead to crashes. Spaniards looking for respite from the pandemic's gloom and doom are turning their attention to a rite that has marked the beginning of the festive period for over 2 centuries. The country's bumper Christmas lottery, known as El Gordo, or the Fat One, has been held annually since 1812. The lottery will dish out the equivalent of $2.7 billion in prizes this year, or 70% of ticket sales. Tickets cost €20. Madagascar's 57-year-old police minister and an Air Force mechanic swam for 12 hours after their helicopter crashed in the Indian Ocean. General Serge Gell was discovered in the water by a fisherman in a canoe, while Chief Warrant Officer Jimmy Leitsara swam to a beach. General Gell described his swim to safety in a short video posted to Twitter by Madagascar's defense ministry. He says it was not his turn to die. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and this was Forum Daily News. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time.